Hey, hi guys, how are you doing? Most welcome to the Ugaman live session. And today I'm going to be talking about the impact of COVID around Africa. So, with me, I have two reports that have been put out since we got into the COVID situation. And due to that, there is a lot of things that have changed, or a lot of things continue to change across Africa. And what I'm going to look at today is I'm going to look at the two reports, one that was put out by the United Nations and another that was put out on the East African countries by Deloitte. Now, Deloitte is an auditing firm that also does a lot of analysis and studies on economies and, of course, during crises like the one we are facing today. So, this is what I'm going to be talking about. Thank you, Jeros. How are you doing? Nice to be talking to you. All right. So, first and foremost, guys, if you're watching this live session, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you're new, if you see my face for the very first time. And if you don't want to miss out on any videos that I upload or any live sessions that I do, please go ahead and turn on the notifications bell so that you never miss out on any content that is being posted on this channel. So, guys, I just want us to have a clear discussion because I know many of us have been asking a question, what do we do next after COVID? But the thing we need to discover is before we start saying what do we do next after COVID, we need to discover how much has COVID-19 impacted on us? How much has COVID-19 impacted on our economies? How much has it impacted on us as individuals? This is the way to go. This is what we need to understand first, and then we can be able to revise answers for the future and also to understand how we're going to deal with the situations that are going to come at the end of this pandemic. But as of now, we need to understand what has been put out in the reports. Like I have said, I have a report by the United Nations on Africa on the impact of COVID-19 that is actually focused on showing how COVID-19 is going to be impacting Africa on its economy, health, peace, and security, and all that. Then I also have another report that we're going to be going through briefly that is looking at East African countries, that is Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, as a study space that was done by Deloitte. So, as you guys watching, it is very, very important. And I always tell my friends, we always need to keep updated. We always need to know what is actually going on, because if we don't take time to know these things, nobody is going to know these things for us. So, as somebody that is watching this live video, I'm not talking about entertainment, even though entertainment is one of the industries that was affected in Africa. I am talking about COVID-19 and its impact on Africa. So I want you guys to take some time. Like I have said, there is a report by the United Nations, which was put out in May, and there is also another report by Deloitte, which was actually put out in June. So the one of Deloitte looks at East Africa, and the one of United Nations looks at Africa as a whole. Okay, it may be too early to predetermine all the impacts that COVID-19 is going to have on the African economy. However, it is very important to note that many countries are already facing those challenges because, like you remember, when nations started locking down their economies, nations started sending their people into lockdown, business activities reduced, and of course, so many things were grounded, including the flight industry. Airspaces were being closed, so countries would not be able to move. So, first and foremost, I want to read to you what the United Nations mentioned or put out as part of those effects or the impact that COVID-19 is going to have on the different sectors. And one of the sectors is health. Okay, so this is what they put in their report. The global health response must emphasize solidarity towards developing countries, guided by the notion of health as a global public good. African countries with partner support can take measures to improve testing capacities, access to medical supplies, and participation in vaccine and treatment research, enhance production and innovation through intra-African collaboration, expand deployment of community health workers, which proved effective during previous health crises, including by tapping into the diaspora expertise. Once vaccines or medical treatment for COVID-19 are discovered, it is critical that Africa benefits from the equal access. In addition, these measures must be part of the comprehensive effort to improve the resilience and preparedness of healthcare systems that will be increasingly exposed to risks from climate-induced natural disasters to conflicts. Okay, so that is the report, what the report says. So when it comes to the health sector, that is what the report is saying. It is giving Africa I have a note here, so let me see, just a moment. Okay, cool. All right. All right. Okay, so I have someone who is supposed to join me into this conversation, and I was talking to them. Okay, fantastic. So the United Nations is saying this review how we are actually prepared with any future challenge, um, crises that have been induced in our communities as changes in weather patterns. So they are saying this is the time to tap into the diaspora expertise, and also this is the time to leverage on partners to make sure that as Africa, we still remain prepared to face the disasters that every other nation is facing around the world as a result of COVID-19. So the report clearly notes that all nations need to start preparing healthy workforces, and also it clearly notes that this is the time for Africa to tap into the expertise from partner states who actually may have better laid out service delivery in terms of controlling disease and also in terms of doing research to find vaccines, which I think is a very, very positive impact. Of course, we know Africa was not prepared for COVID-19, but we know so many countries that have started to revamp their health systems to make sure that they cope up with the current situation that we're all going through. So this becomes very, very key for everybody. So that is what the United Nations put in their report. So they also went ahead to give their insights on the socio-economic impact of COVID-19. So this is what they say. To help address the devastating economic and social consequences of the crisis, we need a comprehensive global response package amounting to a double-digit percentage of global gross domestic product for Africa. So that means more than $200 billion. All of Africa's partners must mobilize. We also need an across-the-board debt standard still for African countries, as well as comprehensive options towards debt sustainability, okay, and solutions for structural issues in the international debt architecture, increase the resources from the multilateral lending agencies, including through the rising IMF special drawing rights from also the critical of the region's success in dealing with the consequences of the pandemic. Okay, it is vital that measures to address the economic and social fallout of the crisis include direct support that will keep households afloat and businesses solvent. There must be a focus on the most affected people and areas in Africa. The steps so far taken by the African governments to save lives and protect livelihoods with a people-first approach and their efforts to support large, medium, and small enterprises, as well as informal sector, which is the predominant sector for women's employment, need to be sealed up sustainably. Okay, so also looking at the socio-economic impact of COVID-19, the UN goes ahead to suggest that countries, it is now time countries to look at how to structure their, international day that the African economies can be able to benefit from uh, and medium enterprises are being consolidated across Africa. To look at the socio-economic approach that many of the African nations used, they looked at protecting our people, protecting us, the citizens in the different countries. And this is why you find that the lockdown was one of the major solutions that every country had towards preventing COVID-19 and towards preventing the real bigger impact that would greatly and adversely affect the African nations. So many countries decided to lock down. But hey, in the report, the United Nations notes that governments have to intentionally set up financial muscles that can enable the small and medium enterprises to survive. Otherwise, without this, then it becomes a very risky venture for government to do lockdowns and without preparing the financial or the economic bit of preparedness in this COVID-19 and the impact it is going to have on the economy. So I think that was a very good thing, because also the United Nations noted that African countries now, it is time to benefit from partner states who actually have been financing some of their budgets and some of their bills. And I find this very interesting, because you look at it, we have been borrowing from all these developed nations, and in times when we don't even have a crisis like the one we have at hand today. And because of that, you find, many times the money has been used. Yeah, some of it, of course, used appropriately, and the rest of it sometimes misused by some of the people that are supposed to be using it properly. But at the end of the day, there is need for African governments to now reevaluate some of those partnerships and go to the right partners to make sure that they financially support their economies. Because once the small and medium enterprises collapse because of COVID-19, then there is going to be a huge number of people who are unemployed. And of course, talking about these people, you're talking about university graduates, you're talking about people who have been in the corporate world, you're talking about startups that are going to close out, you're talking about women who are going to be out of employment. So if you look at all those put together, then I totally agree with the UN report that it is time for the African nations to review some of their, financial partners that have been, lending money to Africa. And it also becomes a very good choice if you can negotiate, loans and debts that are really beneficial to our nations. So that was the finding about socio-economic impact of COVID-19. So the UN report also went ahead to look at food security. Now, guys, we must understand that even though we have been affected by COVID-19, we still have a very big opportunity that in Africa, agriculture can still go on. Okay, so one other thing that I think African countries need to look at, and I'm giving this opinion based on my nation and, of course, based on the East African nations that are surrounding Uganda. Um, One thing I have discovered is that despite the fact that COVID-19 has affected so many businesses, especially those in the service industry and those that are working from urban areas, areas where people need to gather to meet face to face and exchange a service or a product, COVID-19 has greatly not impacted so much on agriculture, meaning production in agriculture can still happen. The only thing that maybe is going to be very tricky also is the fact that at the end of the day, the people that are processing these agricultural products and those that are selling the final product may not be able to meet face to face with the buyers, but the agriculture as an industry still goes on. So the UN gave their insights as regards the impact of COVID-19 on Africa in regards to food security, and this is what the report was saying. Many Africans risk becoming food insecure as a consequence of this crisis. It is important to prioritize agriculture by declaring it a critical sector that should not be interrupted by COVID-19 related measures. Food corridors need to be secured and farmers supported to ensure you to ensure uninterrupted supplies and food security. Similarly, focus should be on regions and communities where risks are most acute, strengthening social protection systems and safeguarding access to food and nutrition for the most vulnerable groups, especially young children, pregnant and breastfeeding women, older people, and other at risk people. Okay, so that is what the UN report notes. It clearly states that if handled well, COVID-19 should not have an impact on agriculture. And also, African governments need to take an extra mile to protect and make sure they do watch out for food corridors. The sources of food to their people should never be blocked by this disease. So, guys, allow me to invite someone here who is actually going to be talking to us. I have two people that are going to be talking to us. So, guys, kindly send in your requests. I'm going to be inviting you on screen. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the impact that COVID-19 has had on you as an individual, and also we can now expound on the impact that COVID-19 has had on your community and your country as a whole. So please go on, feel free to send me a request. I can drop the comment so that you guys um, can be able to join me live in studio. Okay. So, great. Fantastic. So, guys, if you're if you're watching me, kindly go ahead and click that link. You'll be able to join me live in studio and let's have a conversation. Now, I'm going through a report that is actually or was published by the United Nations on the impact of COVID on African countries. And some of the things that we've already talked about is the UN talked about health, they talked about the socio-economic impact, and now they talked about food security as another measure. And of course, what is most important, because we need to remember that some of these countries and the continent as a whole can only boost its economy if we are able to have peace and security. Okay, there is no doubt. There is no doubt that peace and security has been greatly affected by COVID-19 in Africa. And this is what the United Nations report actually had to say about that. So, when it came to peace and security, they said while dealing with the menace of the pandemic, maintaining peace and security in Africa remains paramount. Priorities in this regard include silencing the guns, implementing the Secretary General's and African Union's Commission Chairperson's appeal for a ceasefire, sustaining peace processes, and critical peace operations. Okay, so the response to COVID-19 needs to be conflict sensitive and avoid generating new tensions. Decisions regarding planned national elections should be taken in an inclusive and consultative manner. An inclusive security approach will also ensure that the spike in violence in the home and harmful practices such as child marriage, sexual abuse as a result of the pandemic are integrated through preventive measures into response planning. Okay, so this is what the UN report actually had to put out on the issues of peace and security. So we know that very many countries are actually going to election periods and stuff like that. And as a result, it's very, very important to note that during the COVID-19 pandemic, so many countries that had planned or whose elections are actually falling within this year have to very, very, very carefully study the trends in their countries and make sure that they don't, first of all, step on the democratic rights of their citizens. But it's also very important to remember that, you know, the lives of people matter, the lives of people come first. So for every nation that is going to be, you know, implementing elections, is going to be having some processes that regard elections and campaigns. They need to evaluate the situation in their particular countries and make sure that it does not actually harm their own citizens, but also it does not in any way violate the democratic rights of the citizens. So it's a situation where the UN recommended that as governments in those particular countries, they need to be able to look out and make sure that people and all other aspects are put into consideration as all these decisions are being made. The report also calls for ceasefires for those that have been having tensions between maybe countries or between certain factions within the same country. The report calls for ceasefire, you know, because this is not a period, you know, to escalate another big tensions between countries and nations. This is a period to make sure that people are protected from the deadly disease, and as such, tensions could actually make those efforts a bit futile if that is not observed. So that is what the UN report suggests on peace and security. Okay, so when it comes to human rights, we understand that in such periods there's also great need for people to protect human rights, to protect those that are actually part of the community, those that are doing different activities during this COVID-19 pandemic. So this is what the UN report had to say about the human rights. Okay, so keeping human rights considerations to the fore of COVID-19 response results is better and is a better outcome. Citizens' trust in institutions, transparency, and social cohesion appear to enhance compliance with response to measures, inclusion and participation of women and youth, and respect of human rights to be upheld in delivery of the COVID-19 related services and in the fight against the virus. Recovery from the crisis must lead to more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economies and societies. So this is what the United Nations recommends, that during the period of COVID-19, of course, there is going to be a huge impact on human rights, but the report calls on all governments in Africa to respect human rights and make sure equal participation of women, equal participation of um, wow, thank you, the Influencers Inc. Equal participation of women, equal participation of the youth, and equal participation of minority groups in our society. So this report still calls upon the governments across the different countries in Africa to make sure that this should not be a period to violate human rights. Okay, of course, it is known that there are so many governments in Africa which do not also sometimes allow equal participation of their citizens into the different exercises and different activities that they carry out in their nation. So this report calls on every African government to ensure that equal participation of everybody in their countries, and especially the minority groups, and also participation of women and youth into the processes and all other things that are in those countries should be observed and should be taken into consideration. So, guys, if you are watching in and you want to join this conversation, right now I'm going through the UN report on the impact of COVID in Africa. The UN actually put out a report that is guiding and has a lot of details on how nations could be able to overcome the adverse effects of COVID-19 onto their economies and into their countries. So this is why I'm going through this report. Now, I'll put a link to this report in the description of this video so that if you want to read it, then you are able to go through it. But this report has talked about the health impact, it has talked about the socio-economic impact, and if you've just joined in and you haven't watched the whole video, it will be very important for you to know how COVID-19 is actually affecting Africa as a bloc and how it is affecting Africa as a continent, because this is where we start from now to gauge how we are going to be surviving. Okay, this report talks about small, medium enterprises, it talks about security, it talks about food security, it talks about how African countries can be better prepared for crises like the one we are facing currently, and how we can go into the future with a better prepared kind of continent to deal with any health challenges. And of course, it also notes that due to changes in climate and weather and stuff like that, it's become a very key factor for us as citizens in Africa to start knowing how to deal with some of these challenges. And this is what this report states. Now, as I continue down to go through this report, there are quite a number of things that Africa needs to be responding to, that African countries need to be responding to. And these were also highlighted in the report. For example, situations where the health emergencies must be dealt with. We have situations of, emergencies where some countries were dealing with some healthy situations before the COVID-19. Countries like DRC Congo, where these countries are at a very big risk during this period of COVID-19. So such nations need to pay close attention to how they do deliver services and to how they handle the COVID-19 situation. Okay, so it is also very important that the situations that need quick responses, the governments across Africa come out and respond. And what are some of those key areas? Now, some of those key areas is the healthy sector. Now, for a government that has been dealing with different challenges in their health systems, the COVID-19 impact is even a little bit going to be deeper, but you need, as a government, to be able to deal with the available challenges that you are going to be facing. Then, secondly, for those that have been having tensions, political wars and political tensions, some have been having trade tensions. This is a very, very important period, because for every country that is going through this period, that is very tough. They need to be able to come out and deal with these tensions to make sure that they get to sit down on a table and discuss. So this is what the report suggests as well. So the other thing that the report is suggesting is a situation where economies need to come out and save their small and medium enterprises. So this is a very, very key factor for many countries to make sure that their economies don't actually totally collapse. We understand that the employment rates have gone down, and so many companies are downsizing due to the fact that they have not been able to make enough money in the last 3 months, and therefore many of them are not able to sustain the workforces they have been having over the years. And because of that, they actually now need to come out and be saved by the governments across Africa. So that becomes also a very, very important factor for governments and those in power, in authority across Africa, to make sure that small and medium enterprises are saved. Okay, so guys, that is what the report states. That is what the report states as of now. That is what the report states as of now. And right now, I want to focus also on another report that came out in the same regard. This report is from Deloitte, okay? And it is talking about how to thrive, how to respond, and how to recover, okay, from the deadly pandemic that is facing the world. But of course, this report talks about East Africa in particular, okay? So the introduction of the report is the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic is currently causing significant adverse impact on the global economy. Governments around the world are implementing various fiscal measures to mitigate the adverse effect and provide relief for businesses and households. Across the East African region, the impacts of COVID-19 are being felt in different ways, and the measures taken by the respective governments have also differed on the areas of focus and comprehensiveness. In this publication, we provide insights on the expected economic impacts of COVID-19 in Ethiopia, various measures proposed by their governments to mitigate the impact due to the fast-paced nature of this pandemic and the ensuing government measures and economic impact. We have used available data through from May 8th to the current date. Okay, so of course the report goes ahead to talk about the global picture in terms of cases, but something that is very interesting is this, where you need to know the global impact of how COVID-19 is impacting on global industries. Okay, so airline passenger revenues estimated to drop by US dollars 314 billion in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. Okay, and then global airline ticket revenue to drop by 55% in 2020 compared to 2019. All right. So global vehicle sales estimated to decline by 19% in 2020 from about 90 million sales in 2019 to an estimated 73 million sales in 2020. The passenger car segment is projected to decline by 11%. That is US dollars 100 billion loss in revenue. Okay. However, several global automotive manufacturers have started opening up their plants, albeit with caution. In the US, Honda, Toyota, and FCA plan to start operations in early May or started operations in early May 2020. US vehicle sales are estimated to decline by 24% in 2020. In China, Volkswagen has managed to restart operations in 32 of its 33 plants, while Nissan, Hyundai, Honda, BMW, Toyota, Volvo, and General Motors have also resumed operations. In China, vehicle sales are estimated to decline by 14% in 2020. So these are some of the global impacts that COVID-19 is going to have on the global industries. Okay, so the World Travel and Tourism Council estimates losses of 100 million jobs and up to US dollars 2.7 trillion impact on the GDP of the 100 million jobs at risk. Almost 25 million are estimated to be in the G20 countries. Okay, so there is a huge impact of this disease, of course, on the travel industry. Okay, so the COVID-19 pandemic has contributed to a dampened demand for oil, resulting in plummeting oil prices and declining production. Global oil demand is estimated to fall by 9.3 million barrels per day. That is in 2020. US oil prices have hit an all-time low, with a barrel going for about 30 US dollars as of the 20th April 2020, and the first time oil prices have ever turned negative. Okay, so in light of the unprecedented depth of the crisis, oil producers in the OPEC group agreed to cut output by the initial 9.7 effective by 1st May 2020. So guys, there is quite a lot of insight in these two reports, and the reason I'm reading through some of these reports is, guys, it's very important to keep yourself aware. If we are going to deal with what the COVID-19 pandemic has actually brought onto the African economies, then we need to understand how the impact is going to be affecting our different economies and how that effect can actually be escalated down to our daily activities and our daily businesses. Because if we don't know that, then it becomes very hard to deal with this situation. It becomes very tough for us to know what we need to do to be able to survive the adverse effects of this COVID-19. So the impact of COVID-19 on Kenya, of course, this report by Deloitte still goes ahead to say, for example, there will be US dollars 658 million drop in revenue collections in the remaining 3 months to the 2019-2020 fiscal year, which just recently ended. It indicates that the governments are going to be losing, but especially Kenya is going to be losing around 658 million US dollars in the last 3 months that will be closing the fiscal financial year. Of course, lending rates, savings, and deposit rates remain largely unaffected and currently average of 12.24%, then 4.02% and 7.11% respectively. Okay, 3.1% US dollars, 545 million estimated decline in total import value, and 36.6% decline in Chinese imports. So Kenya shillings is under pressure due to reduced forex earnings, mainly on account of reduced exports, and stood at Kenya shillings 106 US dollars for every $1 as of 8th May when this report was published. Okay, so quite a number of effects and impact that COVID-19 is causing on the Kenyan economy. So, of course, looking at some of the, summarized report of key issues that the Kenyan economy is going to face. Kenya's GDP growth averaged 5.4% in 2019 and had been projected to grow about 5.7% in 2020 amid robust private consumption and higher credit growth, and raising public and private investment. Further, as the COVID-19 pandemic hampers revenue because of collections, then the negative outlook of Kenya's financing risks becomes exposed. As such, the large gross borrowing requirements, which include amortization of external bilateral debt and the need of refinance at large stock of short-term domestic debt, have seen rating agents and Moody change Kenya's sovereign credit and outlook. The things that are going to happen is reductions in household and disruption in the supply chain for key inputs in machinery and chemicals about 30%, decline in imports from affected countries about 3.1 estimated decline in total revenue. So this report from Deloitte indicates that Kenya's GDP, first of all, was projected to grow from 5.4 to 5.7 by end of 2020, which may not be possible. But they also mentioned that this COVID-19 is going to have a reduction in household and business expenditure by 50%. And this is as a result of lack of credit, that credit constraints, where banks are saying, hey, we are not lending out as much as we used to do before the COVID-19, and we are also holding back on some of our terms and conditions. So the same report goes ahead to mention Ethiopia. Now we need to remember that Ethiopia is one of those economies in Africa that is very, very promising, and quite a lot is going to be said about Ethiopia, but this is the summary that this report has. So Ethiopia is Africa's second most populous country with more than 110 million people. The country's real GDP growth in 2019 was 9% and was forecasted to be 6.2% in 2020 pre-COVID-19. Okay, this forecast has now been revised downwards to 3.2. So you can imagine this decline in the GDP growth from 6.2 to 3.2, almost 3 percentage points down what was expected. So this is mostly due to disruption in supply chain and weakened global demand, which has affected the inflow of raw materials and finished products for manufacturing and trading in Ethiopia. So a sharp rise in inflation as domestic food prices rise steadily, that is owing to a sharp decline in harvest because of the locust infestation. Now, we need to remember that also Ethiopia was one of the countries that was adversely affected by the locust invasion in Africa. There were a few countries. Kenya was part of that. Um, Uganda partially received the locust invasion, but Ethiopia, Kenya, and some countries in the Horn of Africa really were hit hard by the locust invasion. So we can see here that the GDP of Ethiopia is actually declining as a result, partially as a result of the locust invasion, which affected agriculture. Okay. Also, there is a sharp decline in tourism as the coronavirus pandemic deters travelers, with hotel occupancy rates decreasing by about 2% and cancellations on bookings for the next 3 to 6 months. And the last one that is being noted here is significant job losses. Ethiopia's Job Creation Commission has estimated between 700,000 to 2 million jobs are likely to be lost in 2020, depending on the severity of the virus on Ethiopia's economy. So that is what the impact is going to be on Ethiopia. And of course, this report still goes ahead to mention some of the things. But most interestingly, I want to take you guys through what this Deloitte report says is the impact of COVID-19 on Tanzania and Uganda, because I'm specifically interested in these two countries because I've been following up some of the stories happening in these nations, and because of that, I think it will also be very key to look at the impact of COVID-19 on Tanzania's economy, and also look into the impact on Uganda's economy. So on Tanzania's real GDP was initially estimated to increase by 5.3% in 2020, down from 6.3 in 2019. However, following the COVID-19 pandemic, Tanzania's GDP growth is expected to decline to 2% in 2020. So that is something that is very shocking. And Tanzania's GDP, of course, we know that it was 6.3 in 2019, and it was expected that if 2020 had gone well without the COVID, it would be declining to 5.3. And now, because of COVID, the GDP is expected actually to decline to 2%. Now, this is mainly attributed to an expected decline in the tourism sector's growth following the imposition of the global travel restrictions and closure of hotels in Tanzania. Okay, so decline in international trade due to supply chain disruptions and waning international demand for Tanzania's mineral exports as exports destinations report economic slowdowns as a result of COVID-19. An imminent lockdown in Tanzania that would halt a majority of domestic economic activity, save from essential sectors such as utilities, communications, and healthcare. So these are some of the factors that are going to actually push Tanzania's GDP as low as 2% from the 5.3 estimated growth, of course, which is still lower than what their GDP was in 2019, but it now goes down to 2%, which is a very low GDP. And you have heard Tanzania greatly depends on tourism and hotel industry, but now because people are not traveling into the country, so that is one of the reasons cited in the report. This report was made by Deloitte. It is going to be available, guys. If you need this report, by the way, go ahead and comment on this video. I'll be able to send you this report. I want us guys to pick an interest in finding out some of this information, because if we are to make, what most people forget is that the impact of COVID-19 on the general economy in a given country actually now trickles down to a real household income. It trickles down to the job you're doing. It trickles down to the activities that you do as an individual. And it is very important to understand how this disease, this global pandemic is going to be affecting your country. Of course, this is not 100% accurate, but this has been scientifically done, that projections and figures have been checked to also see that there is a forecast that brings hope and things like that. So make sure that you at least try to get some of this information and use it for, for your own growth. So I'm going to look at Uganda. Uganda is, of course, also in this report by Deloitte, and I'm going to look at some of the estimated impact that COVID-19 is going to have on Uganda. And if you're watching me and you've been following up, actually is estimating what is going on today. So Uganda's GDP growth averaged between 5.9 in 2019 and had been projected to grow at about 5.3 in 2020 amid steady agricultural growth, expansion in gold processing, and delays in oil projects. However, in light of COVID-19 pandemic, GDP growth is expected to decline to 3.5%. Okay, to 3.5%. So if you're looking at the bigger picture, if you're looking at looking at what this COVID-19 is going to do to the Ugandan economy, if you are into a startup, if you're a small or medium enterprise, this is very important information for you, because you need to know how to deal with some of these impacts. And the reason our GDP is going to decline to 3.5 away from the 5.3 that was expected to be attained in 2020, these are some of the major reasons. So a slowdown in agriculture production from the localized impact of a regional locust outbreak in northeastern Uganda. Now, I would like to disagree with the first point that was mentioned in this report, because I don't think Uganda was really that much hit by the locust invasion that it can actually greatly affect our production rates, because these locusts did not stay long in Uganda, but also the eastern part that was affected, they did not destroy a lot of agricultural products. So I think this point was a bit generic. I don't know if Deloitte took into account of, having the point reviewed and the impact on ground, but that is one of the points that they mentioned. So the second point is a sharp decline in tourism as the COVID-19 pandemic deters travelers. So this is also something that is true. Yes, there of course, no visitors are coming into Uganda as a nation, so a lot of disruptions have happened, and that means that there will be a decline in tourism they've on people's businesses and economic activities. And actually, for many small medium enterprises that was most of their employees, were asked to stay home because of the lockdown. So that impacts greatly on on Uganda as an economy due to COVID-19. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. This video is very important, especially for people who may want to know some of these factors that how the African economy has been affected by COVID-19, but also by the things we need to know so as to deal with these adverse effects. So thank you so much for watching. I remain Ugaman, and of course I'll see you guys again. If you are watching this video, please don't forget to share it, and also don't forget to leave a comment so as to be able to understand what you think about this conversation. So I'll see you guys again. I'll catch you again very, very soon. May God bless you all. Don't forget, get better, not bitter.